Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. The 2019 legislative session is more than halfway through. This week, lawmakers met another deadline to pass appropriations and revenue bills originating in their own chamber. A bill designed to keep doctors who've recently graduated from medical school in Mississippi passed the House and is headed to the Senate for more work. House Bill 1670 would reward doctors who stay here and work in rural areas of the state. House Republican Jeff Smith chairs the Ways and Means Committee. He explained the bill.
What it requires is that a physician be new out of his residency or fellowship. And the reason that's important because some subspecialties do a fellowship and some specialties just do a residency. So within their first 12 months, they can locate in a county that has less than one physician every 2,500 people. And if they locate in that county, they will be able to claim their income tax for a period of 10 years earned in that county. They don't have to declare that income tax or pay any income tax on those earnings. And it's just for new physicians. It's not for older physicians that maybe want to come and locate. It's to recruit the young ones out of the University Medical Center or William Carey and try to get those people to realize that rural Mississippi is dying for doctors, and I don't mean that as a pun.
A bill that would reduce access to unauthorized cell phones in state prisons is moving through the legislature. House members passed a Senate bill out of the Corrections Committee that would give circuit courts the authority to cut off the service to cell phones. Earlier in the session, Corrections Commissioner Felicia Hall said it's a serious problem.
We found approximately 3,000 cell phones during the calendar year of 2018. And so we know that the market for cell phones is out there. The market for individuals to smuggle in that contraband is out there. And we're trying to do everything that we can outside of federal intervention with the FCC to be able to address this issue.
Mississippians receiving Medicaid benefits could be eligible for addiction treatment if a Senate bill makes it through the legislature. Senate Bill 2439 would allow the state to apply for waivers from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid to cover treatment costs. House Republican Chris Brown of Nettleton chairs the Medicaid committee. He tells MPB's Desiree Frazier the opioid crisis led the federal agency to be more lenient and make waivers available for short-term substance abuse treatment.
It should give more access to substance abuse care. So there's 5 facilities now that aren't able to offer that to our Medicaid population and our Medicaid beneficiaries. This will allow them to start doing that. So try to get help where we need it in substance abuse.
So opioids has been a major concern. This bill will help pay for clients to go in for treatment and receive treatment? Yes,
it will. And so we have to apply for a waiver. Again, CMS said they would relax those rules. So the Division of Medicaid will apply for the waiver, and once we get that, it'll open it up for Medicaid beneficiaries.
Do we know how many would be able to access this care?
We don't know the exact number, but it will serve quite a few people.
The bill now goes to the House floor for a vote. There are 15 community and junior colleges in Mississippi. According to the State Community College Board, those schools provide more than 130 career and technical training programs. Supporters and staff from community colleges are urging lawmakers to increase their funding. Finney Ruffin is with Jones Community College.
Today we're here for awareness mainly. We want our legislators, the voters here in Mississippi, to understand that the community college serves everybody from every end of the state, and we really want to know that we have support financially to continue to do what we do. We're asked to do a lot of projects, and we love to help our community because that's who we are. We're based in our community. We develop our communities, we support our communities. And so we just need the funding to support that, from early childhood education to lifelong learners. We hit everybody that there is in the state of Mississippi, and we want to make sure that we have funding there to support that.
A controversial bill came up for debate twice this week on the House floor. The Landowners Protection Act, Senate Bill 2901, passed the House with a vote of 78 to 36 and is going back to the Senate for more work. The measure would limit the liability of landowners when a serious crime occurs on their property. Republican Mark Baker of Brandon explains the bill.
So a landowner owns a piece of property. A landowner is not fundamentally responsible for liable for everything that occurs on that property. You understand that? And so the question is what is the landowner liable from the standpoint of events that occur on the property? Now, we're not talking about negligence cases. We're not talking about slip and falls and cracks in the parking lot and things like this that may cause injury. What we're talking about are willful, wanton, and intentional conduct. For example, if somebody comes on the property and shoots somebody or causes serious harm intentionally to somebody. The question is when is the landowner liable for that? Some believe, as you heard the questioning today, that simply because it happened, the landowner's responsible. That's not the law, never has been the law. So what we were trying to do is clarify two particular points, and one is what is an atmosphere of violence that would constitute the basis upon which to impose liability on a landowner or to have the matter of the question of liability determined by a jury. And we decided that in looking at this, it's reasonable to limit it in time to 3 years because that's the general statute of limitations. It's reasonable to limit that onto the property because the landowner would not necessarily be aware of what was happening on other people's property. And it's also reasonable to limit that to felonies that have resulted in arraignments. In other words, something that was more than just a report, something like I heard this happened or something like this, something that actually resulted in a felony indictment that resulted in an arraignment. Now, we didn't go so far as to require a conviction or things like this, but we did say it had to get to the arraignment stage. And if you can show 3 of those occurring within a 3-year period on the property, you've created a fact question as to whether or not there is in fact an atmosphere of violence. But if you can't, a landowner has some assurance that simply because it happened on the property, the landowner is not going to be just per se responsible for that act. And the second thing is the violent nature of an individual that commits the act. Did the landowner know that this person had a violent tendency, which in fact resulted in the injuries that are contended? And what we're saying is that there has to be actual knowledge by the landowner of this violent propensity to commit a wrongful act, knowledge that the person's on the property, knowledge that this person has this violent propensity, and then in fact there's a proximate relationship between that person and the conduct alleged.
The bill's critics say it removes the incentive for businesses to provide reasonable security. A floor debate led to testimonies from House members saying they fear the bill would make Mississippi less safe. Democratic Representative David Beria of Bay St. Louis told the story of 2 Texas natives, Jimmy and Mona Johnson, and what happened during their stay at a Motel 6 in Mississippi.
They drove all the way from Ganado, Texas, and got to Jackson, Mississippi on October 13th. And they went inside and checked in, and Mona asked again, "Is this safe? We're going to be all right here?" They said, "Yes, ma'am. This is a safe property." Jimmy went fishing while Mona stayed in the room. He went and scouted Barnett Reservoir, looking forward to fishing the next day. He comes back home, and he's standing outside his hotel room, smoking a cigarette, talking on the cell phone, and his wife Mona's inside. She hears, and she goes to the door and opens the door, and her husband Jimmy falls in on her feet, a hole in his head. A robber had come through a down back fence where no cameras were working because they had gone down and they hadn't repaired the cameras, and where there was no security on the premises, and walked up to Jimmy, put the gun to his cheek, and pulled the trigger. Killed him. Took his phone, ran off the same way he came. I represented the Johnsons. I was proud to represent the Johnsons. Sad to represent the Johnsons. What we found out when we got in that case is there had been multiple person-on-person assaults and other crimes on that property. There had been hookers turning tricks out of the rooms on that property. Dope dealers on that property. Other crimes all around that property. The owners knew or should have known that property was not safe.
Staff from the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence is asking lawmakers to vote against the Landowners Protection Act. David McDowell says if it becomes law, trafficking at motels could become easier for criminals.
I think it's really important for us to look at this through the lens of trafficking, which also is included in interpersonal violence, and it's something that we take very seriously at the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We can talk about what happens behind closed doors between two people who know each other well, but when it comes to trafficking and how often that occurs inside motel rooms, if there is not somebody keeping an eye on that or a reason to keep an eye on it, then it will flourish. And at a time when we're trying to address that issue here at the legislature, I think that should be taken into account.
Republican Mark Baker of Brandon rejects the idea that this legislation would cause property owners to make safety less of a priority. He also says the bill is needed because businesses in Jackson are hurting because of the city's crime rate.
The concern that the customers in Jackson should have is that Jackson is only better than 4% of the other cities with regard to the crime rate. The people of the city of Jackson should be concerned that 1 in 14 on a daily basis could be subject to a violent crime. People in Jackson should be concerned that in the first 19 days of the year there were 10 murders. There was a pastor who was robbed and killed opening the church doors on Sunday morning. There were 4 people killed in one day. The people of Jackson should be concerned about this. The problem is that the failure to interdict and stop the crime that is occurring in Jackson is being spilled over to businesses, and businesses are being held strictly liable for anything that handles on their property, which means, as we read in the paper today, the nursing home that's moving from Jackson to Madison because 20-some crimes have occurred within a very short period of time, within a mile radius of their area. People should be concerned, especially people that live in Jackson should be concerned that people are leaving. They have given up on this city because this city has given up on them. And something needs to change. But to put that burden, the failures of the city of Jackson to protect its citizens, to put that burden on landowners simply means the landowners are going to leave. They can't afford the insurance, they can't afford to do business, they can't afford the continued problems that occur with regard to the crime rate that is happening out there and the violent crimes that are occurring in the city of Jackson.
All right, so let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He is an attorney and is a former member of the House. Lucian Smith is with us this week. He's chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. Gentlemen, good to have both of you with us on At Issue.
Good to be here.
Well, let's start with that issue, the Landowners Protection Act. Brandon, you're an attorney. How do you feel about it?
I mean, the Slumlord Immunity Act.
Tells us something right there.
This is, and Mark there at the end, I served with Representative Baker, and there at the end he kind of got off the rails. There's not a thing in this bill that's going to make people less likely to move about within the state, and this certainly isn't going to make Jackson or any other place more safe. We heard from Leader Beria, we heard from others. I happen to have been co-counsel with David on that case that involved the Johnsons. And what we find when we go into these cases is that property owners do a cost analysis. Should we buy this security camera? Should we maintain our fencing? Should we have a security guard? Those things to keep places safe. And they obviously are going to be less incentivized to do those things now that they have essential immunity because of how hard it's going to be to find them liable. And then, another thing, Lucian, we are really getting big into this business of child trafficking and other things. You heard from the Coalition Against Domestic Violence there. At a time when we're trying to be cautious about this type of crime, these types of activities, don't we want private folks who are doing business in the state to be really paying attention to how they maintain security around their business? I think this makes that scenario a lot less likely.
I'm very skeptical of the idea that business owners are making security decisions principally based on whether or not you can apportion fault. I mean, keep in mind that the main focus of this bill, it's the last little bit of tort reform that wasn't done. In almost any other context, if multiple people are at fault, the jury gets to say, you're 40% at fault, Brandon's 60% at fault, we're going to make each of you pay a relative percentage share of your fault. Premises liability is the only real area left in tort law in Mississippi where someone could be 95% at fault. The person who comes on the property, who commits an intentional, violent criminal act, but you're going to make the property owner essentially an insurance policy of 100%. I mean, this is just saying juries ought to be able to look at what happened and apportion fault between the two of them. I think there's always going to be a tremendous amount of market pressure on businesses to make sure that they are secure. I mean, there are clearly, as some of these terrible cases point out, there are clearly some businesses that aren't doing that right now despite this sort of tort liability that they've got. So I think the notion that letting a jury apportion fault between the primary wrongdoer and the owner of the property, I'm very skeptical of the idea that that's going to have any result in any sort of increase in crime or decrease in security.
Before we move off of it, there are two other things that I wanted to bring up. One of them was this. Sometimes whenever Representative Baker talks about this, he acts as if it was some type of idea that just came to him about fairness. Let's be clear here. Insurance companies were pushing this. Insurance companies that don't want to pay insurance policies that cover this type of thing. I mean, it's just pure and simple the truth. But the other thing is, and you know, Lucy and I are both lawyers, I don't really like it when the legislature puts their thumb on the scale to say, we're going to take hundreds of years of case law and codify a particular way of reading it. I mean, our courts do a pretty good job with this issue, and if you've ever tried one of these, it costs a lot of money. A lot of them are not successful. A lot of them get overturned at the Supreme Court based on current law. I kind of, you know, we're civil law, we're a case law state. And I kind of feel like the legislature in this instance took some of that away from the judges who have been doing a pretty good job with this issue in Mississippi.
There may be some of that, but keep in mind the code right now expressly prohibits juries from apportioning fault in a premises liability case, and one of the things this bill does is removes that prohibition. So we're letting the juries, through the jury process, tried by great lawyers like Brandon, come up with, you know, what the right sort of apportionment ought to be. And I'll point out, it certainly has been pushed by, I'm sure their insurance companies are for it. There are 35 different business groups that are for it. And Jay Hughes, the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor, voted for it in the House. So it can't be a totally crazy right-wing piece of legislation if Jay saw fit to vote yes.
I don't know what to say about that. I heard him say that I was a great lawyer, and then I kind of zoned out on the rest of it. So.
We'll give you a pass from that point. Well, but your law partner there brought up the case of the Johnsons at the Motel 6 in Jackson. Let's say that this act had already been had become law. If this were law at that time, do you think the circumstances would have been different for them?
You know, I don't know if David got to it, but it's a great point. So you heard David recount all the different issues they had in that area. Do you know, under the current language of this law, I don't think the Johnsons would have been able to recover, because I don't think that those crimes, even though they were documented and got to a certain phase, I don't think they had gotten all the way to that phase that Baker described within the time frame that I think it's 3 years that is now required. And so this is essentially immunity. You're not going to have a premises case where someone is shot and there's any liability. And so the case that was described there, which everyone, Republican, Democrat alike, seemed to agree was an egregious instance and that there was a lot of problems and that the property owner had failed to maintain their property, you wouldn't have any recovery for that family in this situation. So under the current law, I mean, we can dance around it all we want, but I mean, the truth is we've essentially created immunity for people who run public businesses.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. Let's talk about community college funding. They're asking for more funding. We hear a lot about secondary education and funding for MAEP and education in that regard. Is there money enough, and is there a need to give more money to the community colleges in the state, Lish?
Well, I mean, I think community colleges are a real jewel for education and for economic development in Mississippi. We've got one of the best community college systems in the country, and it's something we ought to be proud of. This funding discussion, to me, really speaks to the problem we've got with the legislature creating funding formulas. There is a funding formula for community colleges. It's the mid-level funding formula that's supposed to put community college funding midway between MAEP and IHL funding. It's never been funded, and I think it's not dissimilar from MAEP in the sense we've created this formula that sometimes just isn't realistic. And so even though more money is being spent on education than ever, people are able to suggest that not enough money is being spent. And I think it's the reason that we ought to get rid of these formulas and let the legislature make, you know, wise decisions based on the amount of money that they're able to actually spend.
If I was the chairman of the party that was in the process of wrecking our budget beyond repair, I would say the same thing, because I don't want to be held to any kind of standard either, because we're clearly not going to meet our funding standard as these tax cuts and tax giveaways to out-of-state corporations come online. We're not going to come anywhere close to funding any of these institutions to what they require. But community colleges in the state of Mississippi are essential to us being competitive in the global economy. And so we do agree on that, Lucian. I mean, you and I both know that community colleges are the real gateway for some of our students to enter into the workforce. And I like what's happening with the private and public partnerships to try to make sure, for example, down in my neck of the woods in Ingalls, they've worked with the Gulf Coast Community College to make sure that folks come out of there ready to take a job, do a specific task. I know there are similar efforts elsewhere. So I think whatever we can do to help make community colleges more accessible, to make them, to really help, I guess, educate our students of what opportunity exists there is going to be important. And I think it's going to be actually an election year issue. I know, for example, I was at a coffee this morning, Jim Hood was talking about community colleges, and I think he would like to see us throughout the state do what they're doing in his 5 counties, which is to try to make it free under certain circumstances.
I am confident we're going to hear a lot this year from the Democrats running for all sorts of offices about all the ways they could spend more money. But I think the fundamental difference between Republican and Democratic budgetary policy, we look at the amount of money that we have and divide it up in the way that we think reflects the priorities of the voters. The Democrats figure out how much money they want to spend and then figure out whose pocket to go take it out of. So as people hear that over the course of this year, I hope and I believe they will be smart enough to ask folks, okay, that sounds like a neat new program. How do you plan to pay for it? Whose money are you going to take to spend on it?
Well, and it's always worth saying. One of the things that we kind of love to say as Democrats in Mississippi is we always get yelled at for throwing money at school, but we hadn't tried that in Mississippi yet. Mississippi isn't a place that's ever thrown money at anything. I mean, we've really got to be smart about how we prioritize things, and of course, budgets reflect our values. But in that 5-county area in Northeast Mississippi, they've been doing it through the county level, and this was something that was led by the Board of Supervisors, and the way that they have it set up, I think it cost them $22,000 this last year, but they paid for it. And so it was a paid-for program, and it worked, and it's essentially for those students who weren't able to get scholarships or some other benefit to go to the community college. So anyway, look, the truth is we've got to be innovative. We've got to start talking about the fact that not everybody goes to a 4-year school, and that's okay. And these community colleges give them skills that, frankly, they're not getting anywhere else. And so the extent to which we can figure some of that out, I think, is going to be crucial to our competitiveness down the road.
Well, and one way I think that Republicans are going to keep providing more money for education, first, keep in mind that education funding is at the highest level that it's ever been because Republicans are in charge and they've appropriated more money to it. But one of the ways we're going to continue doing that is the sort of tax cuts that you referenced have allowed Mississippi's economy to grow. We've got the lowest unemployment in history. Tax collections are at an all-time high despite these cuts being in effect. So I think as our economy continues to grow under Republican leadership, there will be more money to reinvest in education at all levels.
Well, if you don't mind, we need to talk about the economy because I know Republicans like to talk about this. But I mean, Lucian, the facts just don't bear that out. Our neighbors to the north, Tennessee, have seen a 20% growth since 2009. In Alabama, they've seen 8%. Even in Louisiana, where Bobby Jindal did everything to drive it into the Gulf of Mexico, they've seen better growth than here in Mississippi, where we've had 1% growth over that period. And then the other issue is this. We have had a decent year this year. We all agree with that. Revenue's up. It's up $160 million. But starting in July, we're going to have that franchise tax come on the books. That's going to cut down about $95 million this year, according to the Republican Budget Office. Then next year it goes up to $120. Graduates all the way to $400 million a year starting in about 7 years. So even in a year where we've had pretty tremendous growth for us, $160 million, we're not approaching anything near the amount of growth we would have to make up for that revenue. And so the math just frankly at this point doesn't check out. And so we're going to have to get a little bit less allergic to finding ways to create money into the system. And right now it's a regressive system where most of our money comes in through sales tax. That's just a fact.
And I'll say the franchise, first of all, I disagree about the economic stats in Mississippi. I mean, unemployment's at a historic low. The labor participation rate is back up to where it was when the recession started. So we've got more people that are working now than when Republicans took over for the Democrats. And in terms of the franchise tax, I mean, it's an anti-competitive tax that made Mississippi less competitive, and getting that off the books is going to help us draw even more jobs, even more money into Mississippi.
All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but in our remaining time, we want to take advantage of the fact that we do have the Republican Party chair with us, the state chair, and ask you how, with the qualifying deadline now upon us for all statewide candidates, how does this sort of change your strategy here from now to the primary?
You know, so we're neutral under our bylaws until the primary. So what we'll be doing is making sure the primaries are run and getting ready for November, both by building out the infrastructure and by reminding people that there's only one party that reflects the values and views of most Mississippians, and it's the Republican Party. It's the conservative policy that comes out of the Republican Party. And I think the Democrats nationally have moved so far to the left that you're starting to see even Mississippi Democrats are running away from it. We're going to talk more in the coming weeks about the countless supervisors, sheriffs who've left the Democratic Party to run Republican. You even had Steve Holland, the one of the best known Democrats in the Mississippi legislature, has found the Democratic brand so toxic that he's running as an independent. And Steve, if you're watching, the church door is always open.
I helped Steve write a statement that he issued today, and that was a political decision because he felt like it helped him in November. We saw Toby Barker do the same thing, a Republican who's now an independent in Hattiesburg. So those types of decisions are made. We feel great about our ticket. We have the best ticket we feel like we've had in several cycles as Democrats.
Your ticket's been secret until today.
Well, that's right. And look, y'all have heard me say it before. I'm not pleased with that. I wish we had been more vocal about who was running. We ought to be proud of it because I do think that we have people on the ticket such as Jim Hood and Jay Hughes that are going to be, I think, really good representatives of who we are. Ricky Cole's going to be running for Commissioner of Agriculture. We're going to see some other folks who I think sell our message pretty well. So I think you're going to see more enthusiasm. And look, Jim Hood's a lot of things. A San Francisco liberal, he is not. So despite what you might hear from Lucian and others, I think he's reflective of Mississippi values.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you both for being here. Lucian, we appreciate you. We are out of time. Don't forget, you can watch this program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we invite you to tune in to At Issue on MPB Think Radio, Monday mornings at 9. Thank you for joining us on TV. Good night.